The late autumn light fell across Elara Vinter's desk in ochre slabs, illuminating the single essay left behind. The room was a hollow of chalk, dust, and quiet, the day's debates on Keats's odes now a fading echo. Leo Strand remained, a still figure by the window, waiting. She turned the pages, reading not just his analysis of transient beauty, but the careful, deliberate strokes of his ink. Each letter was formed with a reverence for language she had believed extinct, a patient archaeology of thought on paper. It was a quiet curiosity meeting the deep end of meaning, a signal from another mind. Returning it, their fingers did not touch, yet the shared silence over the text felt like a communion. In that stillness, she observed his intense focus, a mirror of her own youthful passion for the layered record of human feeling. She felt the first unsettling shift, a question as simple and profound as the one posed by scientists pondering lost epochs. What if we are not the first? Not in love, but in this specific recognition. Could a connection, homegrown and intelligent in a way pedagogy did not define, rise and then vanish, leaving only the faintest trace? The planet, she knew, was an efficient recycler, most moments dissolved without a fossil. To survive as evidence required rapid burial, specific conditions, and luck. This moment, she sensed, was being buried now in the sediment of memory. His S was a potential marker, an artifact. Future erosion, bells, rules, the slow grind of semesters might erase it all. But for now, in the geological blink of an afternoon, it existed. A civilization of two, perhaps destined to be subducted by time, leaving no skyscrapers, only the chemical signature of a shared glance in the dying light. The slate was never clean. Something always remained, if one knew how to look. Through the darkening weeks, a routine formed, layer upon subtle layer. Leo lingered after class with perceptive questions that were less about grades and more about the architecture of thought itself. Elara, in turn, recommended books, not from the syllabus, but chosen from her own shelves, their selections becoming a silent, escalating dialogue. A history of silent cartographers, a volume of obscure metaphysical poetry. Each loan was a core sample, extracted from the deep strata of her intellect and passed to him for examination. Their most profound excavation occurred in the college library one rain-lashed evening. The world narrowed to a pool of lamplight falling on an open page of dawn. Their voices were hushed, discussing the poet's conceit of a world contracted to a single room. It was a serious, quiet question they explored, not of the universe's beginning, but of a moment's impossible density. Leo's insight was startling. He spoke of language not as a tool, but as a geological process, where meaning was deposited, compressed, and sometimes entirely erased by time. Elara felt a thrill of recognition, the warmth of being truly seen by a mind that operated at her own pace. He straightened whenever she entered a room, a tectonic shift in his posture she tried not to notice. Her internal conflict grew, a slow-burning friction. The warmth of this intellectual communion battled the cold, heavy weight of her professional code. This was her own Anthropocene, an epoch defined entirely by the human mark of this connection, yet one that must leave no trace in the official record. The evidence would have to be subtle, anomalies in behavior, chemical signatures in a glance. She thought of the scientists, Schmidt and Frank, asking how one detects a civilization after millions of years. They looked for fingerprints in isotope ratios and synthetic molecules, things invisible to the casual eye. Her evidence was equally ephemeral, a shared smile at a textual insight, the charged silence after a pointed quote. These were the synthetic molecules of their bond, compounds not found in nature. The erosion was constant and relentless. The Daily Bell was a tectonic event, separating their continents. The other students were the weathering surface noise. Her walk home alone in the chilling rain was the subduction zone, where the day's interactions were pushed under, buried, and subjected to immense pressure. She understood the staggering truth of deep time. A city abandoned for a few centuries is reclaimed. After a few million, it is gone. This, whatever it was, would be gone in a matter of weeks when the term ended. Wood decays, metal rusts, and even concrete, the most durable of human materials, eventually crumbles. What chance did a glance, a recommendation, a hushed conversation in a pool of light have? The fossil record is spotty not for lack of life, but because the conditions for preservation are extraordinarily rare. Most organisms dissolve without a trace. She feared they would, too. Yet, in the library's silence, under the lamplight, they built something as fragile and complex as a civilization, knowing the planet. Beneath them was already grinding it to dust. Winter deepened, a long season of silence and accumulating pressure. The night of the school's winter concert found them alone again in her classroom, the air still vibrating with the departed echoes of choir songs. The empty chairs were a stark audience to the unsaid words hanging between them. Snow fell past the window, each flake a potential fossil in a storm that would leave no individual record. He broke the quiet, not with a question, but with a quotation. It was a line from a poem she had mentioned only once, weeks prior in passing. His voice was soft, reciting it perfectly. The acknowledgement hung in the chilled air, a tangible artifact. It was the kind of trace scientists like Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank would later ponder, a subtle chemical signature of attention, an anomaly in the expected strata. The ethical boundary felt both vast and paper-thin, a continent's edge above a subducting plate. In a moment of profound weakness, her hand lifted almost of its own volition. The motion was ostensibly to brush a melting snowflake from the wool of his coat sleeve, a gesture as natural as erosion. But she stopped, her fingers freezing mere inches from the dark fabric. The gesture aborted, it became instead a stark study in restraint, a monument to what would not be built. The preservation problem confronted them in that suspended silence. This bond, they both sensed with the clarity of deep time, would leave no public trace, no skyscrapers, no vast stone structures. It was a civilization that had built with glances and quotations, materials that decay with the speed of thought. If their entire species vanished, no future archaeologist would ever find this. The term ended. On the final day, he handed her his last essay. Inside the folded pages, pressed flat and dry, was a single, perfect crimson leaf from the oak under which they had once spoken. It was a silent testament, a deliberate fossil, a rapid burial in paper, a mineral replacement of meaning. It was the kind of marker that might, against all odds, survive, a synthetic molecule of feeling in the geologic record of a semester. Their final glance across the emptying hallway was a library of everything unspeakable, a complete archive compressed into a second. Then the bell, the ultimate tectonic shift, carried him away. She was left holding the leaf, a potential piece of evidence in a case that would never be tried, wondering if the absence of all other evidence was, in fact, the only proof she would ever have.